Welcome back to Rittenhouse Needlepoint in the heart of beautiful Philadelphia. Today we're going to learn the basket weave stitch, also known as the diagonal tent stitch. In our last lesson we talked about 3 stitches which come under the umbrella of the tent stitch. They were the continental stitch, which we covered, the half stitch, which we also talked about, and the basket weave stitch. And as mentioned before, all these stitches look the same on the front, but they look very different on the back. And the basket weave stitch looks just like a woven basket weave on the back, as you can see here. If you remember when we learned the continental stitch in the first lesson, our stitches were made in straight lines, either vertically or horizontally. But the basket weave stitch is worked on the diagonal. It is also very important to understand the weaving of the canvas threads, or what we call the reading of them, as they determine whether we should be working uphill or downhill. So if you look closely at this large stitching board, you will see that there are vertical threads lying over horizontal threads, and there are horizontal threads lying over the vertical threads. So when we're covering a cross section where the vertical thread is lying over the horizontal thread, our row of stitches is going to be working downhill. Vice versa, when we're covering a cross section where the horizontal thread is lying over the vertical thread, our row of stitches is going to be going uphill. So today we're going to be working on a frame. You can see our piece of canvas is fastened with pins onto this small frame and then clamped. We're doing this for ease of photography, but also it is an advantage sometimes to work on a frame because it keeps the piece very square, stops it from going out of shape. So we're going to start with a waist knot, which is a knot in the end of the thread, and it means that it's going to be covered up as we work, and then we will cut the knot off when we reach it. You can also use an away knot if you prefer, and then work the end in later. Now you should always place your waist knot either horizontally or vertically to your first stitch, not diagonally, as this will show up as a ridge on the front of the work. Now the colour painted here, you can see that there are intersections with this colour on, and those denote the colour of thread that we are going to cover those intersections with. You want the tension to be not too tight but consistent. So first of all we want to find out where our first stitch is going to be placed, and we're looking at the very outside of the design. The top right hand area is where we want to start, and you can see I think this is the first row, downhill row, so we can place our needle in here. Remember, the knot always goes in from the front so we can see it, and remember to cut it away. And our needle is going to come up here because we want to cover this first cross section. And if you can see, this thread is laying vertically over the horizontal thread, so it means we're going to be working downhill. Now if we're working on the diagonal, so our next stitch is going to be right here. And you can see again this thread is on the vertical. This is a little tricky concept to get a grasp of, but once you do, you'll find that you enjoy working basket weave. Again, this here is a vertical thread. Okay, so we've reached the end of that row because this one is not painted, so we don't want to cover that stitch. So now we have to find our next stitch. Generally it might be the stitch below, but because we've got a circle shape here, we're going to have to move out and compensate and find the next stitch that has the horizontal thread lying over it. So we're going to have to just step down a couple of intersections to this one here, because now we're going to be working back up. We're going to be stepping up on these horizontal threads. The next one on the diagonal. can see the thread is horizontal, laying over the vertical. And then it looks as though we have one more right at the top of this circle. And that's your uphill row completed. Now we need to set up the next row. So we need to step one over to the left to cover this intersection where we have the vertical stitch, and then we're going to be working downhill again. And you see, as we work these rows, we're actually covering up this piece of fibre that's laying on the back, and that will secure it. So the three most challenging parts of basket weave are learning to read the canvas, which means which direction are we going in, uphill or downhill. The turning stitch, which means that if we're just going to reach that point now, where our next stitch lays directly underneath the last stitch that we made. So we're setting up a new row to go back. A lot of people tend to want to just go to the left at the bottom here, but that means that we're missing this stitch. So we just want to make sure that we catch that stitch there before we start going back uphill. And then sometimes stitches aren't always in sequence, as you saw here. We had to jump down to here to start our new row. So just need to be aware of that. And we're working uphill again over the horizontal thread. When you end and begin in the middle of a row, just make sure that you don't miss any stitches. You need to start your new thread the same place as you ended the last thread. Remember, always starting vertically or horizontally, not on the diagonal. And if you have to jump from one stitch to another, or you're starting a new section, say you've got another design up here that you want to jump to, make sure that it's not more than about 3 or 4 intersections. Otherwise, you want to start a whole new area with the knot so that it's self-contained. You don't want too many long threads lying along the back of your work. So we're now looking, as you can see, for our next vertical thread. Now, this would be the one we would think we would want to use because it would be setting up that new row, but in actual fact it's not painted. So we don't want that one. We want the one below there. That's the first stitch of our vertical threads. And off we go back again. So now we need to set up our new row. Our next stitch is going to be one below. You can see the horizontal stitch is laying over the vertical. So we're going to cover that painted intersection, and off we go back up the hill. And basket weave can really be used anywhere apart from in very tight spaces, or when you just have a single row, and then use continental really only when you have to. I think we'll just go to the end of this row. And then this is the beginning of the next row. So this is a larger piece that's already been worked. I did that just so that I could show you what it looks like on the back. And if you look, you see this lovely interlocking basket weave. It makes it very, very strong. And to finish off your thread, you're just going to weave your needle under 4, 5, 6 stitches, either horizontally or vertically, and pull it all the way through and cut it off. And then to start your next thread, you will do the same thing. You'll just thread it either this way, or you could bring it down this way and start your next stitch would be there. You can see we've already started this row, so you need to make sure that you pick up the next stitch in that row. Now, this is called mono canvas, and that means that it is woven. But there is another canvas called interlocking. And if you look at this, you'll see that it's interlocked. It's not woven in and out, so you can't read the canvas the same as you can with the mono canvas. So if you're working basket weave on this, there's no uphill or downhill. So thank you for joining us today, and we hope that you will check us out on our website at www.myneedlepoint.com.